Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Good morning and welcome back to the lecture series on partition of India in print media and cinema. We are talking about the displaced people and abandoned homes. Today we are going to look at the different fictions, different artworks through which the question of the displaced people, their angst, their trauma and their sense of loss are reflected. So, when we talk of partition, it is not really limited to the chronological, the teleological and chronological barrier of 1947. Like we can see, all the partition is understood as the defining moment which happened on 15th of August 1947. The repercussions before and after keep lingering. While partition persists as a historic moment for those engaged in reinterpreting cultural and national identities in contemporary South Asia, one must remember that the partition historiography is not trapped only to that particular year or the abutting years, the years before and after. It had the causality that we see goes back long in the history of the subcontinent, and the repercussions, the after effects remain after the cracking of the subcontinent happens. So, academic scholarship has shifted away from the prehistories of partition to its immediate impact, and it is more interested now as new scholarships emerge. They study the lived experience, the live experience or experiences rather that render a human dimension to this entire narrative of partition and its aftermath. So, ethnographic studies focus on the period leading up to the partition and its immediate repercussions on the experiences of the displaced people, and so they study the narratives of horror, violence, both within and between different communities. So, it is remarkable that the researchers until a recent time have been treating or have been under the perception that refugees are an undifferentiated mass whose experiences of migration and resettlement are similar. Recent scholarship has developed and added from this assumption. So, recent scholarship has actually revisited and added to this assumption and actually disinterred the fact that partition experience varies according to one's socioeconomic background, something that I have been saying in the past few lectures, and the reconstitution of one's identity once migrated from the pre-partition homeland to the new nation state, the host land, depends on a number of factors, one of which is the official policy, or in fact one of which are the official policies of formulated by the official policies formulated by the new nation states. So, in the case of divided Bengal, we see that citizenship followed a different trajectory. Migration from one territorial unit to another at many times was not permanent, and so the question of one's nationality and national belonging remained obscured, an ambivalent position. It signaled the intent of acquiring new citizenship and simultaneously giving up the original identity. So, we see that acquiring new citizenship would signify giving up on one's original identity. There was a time till which the migrants wanted to maintain their sense of belonging on both sides of the border. So, in the years between the partition and the enactment of appropriate legislation that laid down the regulations and definitions of citizenship in India and Pakistan, the immigrants that had crossed the border were constantly negotiating with these ambiguities, the ambiguities surrounding their process of migration, their residence, and they were struggling with the question of their national identity, where they naturally should belong. So, for each newly formed nation state, the security of the minorities became the what one could call as the acid test of legitimate nationhood. So, minority migration would be traditionally connected and is still connected with the lopsided majoritarian politics in a given nation state. It could be in India or in Pakistan, and each of these countries in South Asia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, accused the other of creating conditions that that stimulated further migration across the border. So, India claimed a moral edge as the census of 1951 recorded that more Hindus had migrated more Hindus had migrated to India from East Pakistan and from West Pakistan than did Muslim migrants leave India. So, India alleged that East Pakistan did not guarantee minority rights, and so whereas East Pakistan countered by accusing India of creating pull factors for the East Pakistani Hindus. So, while India would blame Pakistan for propelling the minorities to emigrate, to evacuate and cross the border, enter India. So, while India would accuse Pakistan for propelling the migration of the minorities and create conditions that that made them cross the border and enter India. Pakistan on the other hand would say that India was creating pull factors for the Hindus. And so, it was India that was responsible for these migrations undertaken by the Hindus and not Pakistan. So, in 1948, the East Pakistan state legislated the Evacuee Property Act in order to assure its minorities that authorities would guard their property and their properties would be handed back to them if they came back to East Pakistan. So, we see that for the East Pakistani Hindus, migration was not always predicated on permanent uprooting like in the West. So, in the West people would normally not even think of going back, but here the Bengali Hindus had this belief that they should be able to retain their kinship and social ties with their ancestral homes. So, there was this following the traditional pattern of urban rural migration which took place during the colonial times. So, during the colonial times we see that a lot of East Bengali Babus or Bhadralok would work in India, in Western Bengal, mainly in Calcutta. So, they would travel back and forth while they had a lot of these migrants had a common history of possessing lands and homesteads back in East Bengal, which became East Pakistan later on, whereas they had their professional ties with Calcutta. So, they had some relatives, some professional connections and networking in Calcutta. They would move back and forth, and it was very difficult to believe that this situation should change forever. So, in the past they had this possibility of return. However, the requirements of post partition states to define and freeze the boundaries and to urgently identify the loyal citizens caused discontinuance of such ties or such such mobility. So, the mobility in a way was cramped, and that is when people had to finally adhere themselves with one nation and nationality. So, the refugees who crossed over to West Bengal from East Pakistan in the late 1940s and early 1950s were primarily from the elite sections, the upper or upper middle classes, and sometimes the middle classes. So, their logical choice of destination was Calcutta, where they found themselves career, and they hoped to find places to resettle, so spaces to resettle, and as well as professional prospects. So, like I said before, they had relatives, relatives, friends and acquaintances in the city, which further facilitated this process of relocation. So, social networking structure of these displaced people played a critical role in smoothening or in enhancing the process of rebuilding the razed life or rebuilding the uprooted life. So, the fact that they knew people in Calcutta enabled them to rebuild their lives with less difficulty after coming to India. So, even individuals that did not come from wealthy families or did not have a lot of money, but were from the upper caste would exhibit this caste pride, and they would claim that their man or honor was being tarnished as a result of cohabiting or coexisting with the Dalits, the Dalit evacuees. So, the general sentiment or the popular sentiment among the middle class upper caste refugees was that the refugee camps that were run by the government and that were claimant and expectant of government doles were meant for the Choto Jat, the lower caste people, and the Bhadralok, the refined class people, were actually entitled for something better. So, they were very conscious of their caste identity, and so decided not to take shelter in the camps alongside the Dalit refugees. So, there would be cases where lands were acquired through legal means and procedures, and the government termed the areas of refugee settlements as private colonies, whereas there would also be cases of forceful occupation of vacant land. These lands would sometimes be apparently vacant or owned by the government or some zamindar, and the squatters, the middle class refugees would forcefully settle on these lands. This process of collective takeover was known as Jabardakhal. So, and this is how squatter colonies would be formed in Calcutta, both through legal and illegal processes. So, after discussing this background, let us look at this story by Vibhuti Bhushan Bandyopadhyay. It is called Acharya Kriplani Colony, and it tells us about the gap between the ideal, one's nostalgic remembrance of homeland back in East Pakistan, and the realities that the refugees had to face. So, the narrative plays around the obsession of the refugees for setting up a home for the homeless, and for people that have in the past lived in favorable conditions, in plush housings, losing of a homestead, razing of one's house and property led to this obsession of rebuilding what one has lost. So, finding a suitable home that would be reminiscent of the land they had come from. So, this image of the home is emotionally charged, and it comprises verdant shrubbery, so a lot of greenery, extensive fields, and naturally available food, and a general warmth which the original home could provide. And this imagery is rife in the minds of the refugees, and so the refugees searched for this idyllic peace, this heaven that they could remember about their lost home, and they wanted to reproduce that lost home while living in the state of exile. Manush Ray talks about Netaji colony and says, in the beginning the people tried to recreate their Desharbari in Netaji Nagar. The landscape of Netaji Nagar was the landscape of nostalgia. It is remarkable how most of the refugee colonies in Calcutta have it's a very verdant milieu. The houses are surrounded by gardens and tree plantations, so trees and a lot of vegetation. So, the houses are surrounded by plenty of vegetation basically and a lot of greenery. It reminds them of the general suburban setting of East Pakistan. So, or the fact that it reminded them of the fertile and suburban lands of East Pakistan. So, so vegetation, greenery, like we can see, is much more on the eastern side of Bengal than in West Bengal, which experienced urbanization under British colonial rule. So, this is something that the migrants, the immigrants want to rebuild after they come to Calcutta. The protagonist in Bandyopadhyay's story chances upon a newspaper advertisement. So, the protagonist in Bandyopadhyay's story chances upon a newspaper advertisement for a plot of land, and the description in this advertisement evokes his utopian vision, or in a way it speaks to his utopian vision of an idealized home, the kind of nostalgia that he had for the home left behind. So, this is something that propels the protagonist or motivates the protagonist to buy the land. So, the Acharya Kriplani colony is advertised as being built on the vast and adjoining land of a certain station only a few miles away from Calcutta, amidst beautiful natural surroundings. The clear and holy waters of the Jahnavi river flow past its southernmost point. So, like I was saying, the suburban ambience is a much coveted environment for the refugees. It is a symbol that harkens back one's lost home in East Bengal, which has always been more fertile and it had more greenery as compared to the western part of Bengal, especially Calcutta, which which most of the refugees were not very happy living in. So, on the one hand there was the desire to get the to enjoy the networking and the economic prospects, the job prospects that Calcutta offered, and on the other hand the refugees would compare Calcutta with their homeland, their ancestral homeland in East Pakistan, and call it as concrete jungle, or a place that was site of depraved people, city people that were generally inclined to dupe the newcomers. So, we have these stereotypical understandings in so many running through so many partition fictions, or partition artworks. These stereotypes keep coming back in so many partition artworks. The romantic portrayal of the promised land of Acharya Kripalani colony emanates an earthy romanticism of a utopian existence, and so it acts as an objective correlative to the protagonist's yearning for the idyllic home. So, and the emphasis on water and extensive land in this advertisement is remarkable. So, the obsession with flowing water or building habitat close to a water body is a leitmotif in refugee testimonials. So, in this regard, Jayanti Basu asks a refugee respondent what he remembered most when thinking about the past, and the response was that I remember water, everywhere there was water. Another respondent says that it was a land of rivulets and lakes. The jute plants were tall as full grown men, but water flowed above them. So, there are many water bodies in East Pakistan, and so the balmy and mild climate is also something that people would recall when thinking of their lives, when thinking of their lives back in East Bengal. The nostalgic identification with water could be understood through the lens of Jungian psychoanalysis, and so according to Carl Jung, water can be related with birth ideations, as water is the archetype of birth. It signifies abundance and prosperity. So, like I have already said, East Pakistan or East Bengal's lands were extremely fertile. At one time, at one point in history, East Bengal would be called the breadbasket of India. So, we know how much it could contribute in terms of food crops and even cash crops. According to Otto Rank, obsession with water refers to the pre-birth security, the state of joyance of being united with the mother's body, of being protected and sheltered inside the mother's womb and surrounded by amniotic fluid. So, the metaphor of flowing water and extensive premises coupled with modern amenities that a city could offer sound as extremely attractive a prospect for the protagonist to overlook. And so, such an advertisement is targeting the refugees who seek the sense of the traditional or conventional sense of protection that the ancestral home would offer, coupled with the job security or the sense of staying close to the city. So, this advertisement actually exploits the utopian desire that is there in the hearts of many refugees. So, that is in the hearts of most of the refugees. So, however, contrary to expectations, when the protagonist ultimately visits the land, he discovers that the advertisement was an ironic compliment to the material reality, what the land actually stands for. It is basically a swampland that Acharya Kripalani colony actually encompassed, and this is how the author describes the colony. The roads were damp and muddy, there were cowsheds and cattle grazing grounds everywhere. The foul smell filled the air and mosquitoes buzzed all around. A mile away, by the side of the road next to a forest, I saw a metal hoarding which displayed in bold letters the words Acharya Kriplani Colony. It is also a kind of dark humor emanating through this description. We can see that what is the result of wanting to reconstruct something that is lost, something that cannot be revived. What is the outcome of wanting to transpose the fertile land, the open panoramic landscape, and then transpose and overlap it with the cityscape? The result is actually the expectations standing on their head. So, the protagonist realizes how the metaphorical panorama of the advertisement, so many attractive words used, they ironically stand in juxtaposition with the material reality of the actual swampland, which is extremely unattractive. So, through this story, Vibhuti Bhushan Bandyopadhyay captures the anxiety of refugee relocation and how they would easily fall prey to exploiters at that time. So, the profiteers exploited the migrants' idealized nostalgic perception of the lost homeland, and they would offer the prospect of second homecoming in order to attract the newcomers. So, here in this case, the landowner, the doctor, waves some receipts in the narrator's face to show him how profitable the prospect of resettling in this land is, and how profitable the prospect of establishing the colony has been for him. Through this story, the protagonist's journey and the expectation followed by followed by the material reality, which never meet at any point. The expectation and the material reality never meet at any point, actually drives home the idea that the promise of primordial stability and security of the past can never be or can hardly be achieved. So, the idea of second homecoming is next to impossible. It was a generic dream for the refugees, but it can never be fulfilled, because ultimately a lost home cannot be transposed and transferred, cannot be transferred and reconstructed and grafted basically in the present scenario. So, any relation except an imaginary or conjured one between the former situation and the current position cannot exist. There is a kind of gap which defines a fractured identity from being a well established individual who boasted a proper foothold in an existing land, to someone that has suddenly become a refugee and who wants to refurbish that status. This gap is actually examined by authors through tragic tone, through dark comedy and satire, as well as through voicing out the displaced person's sense of indignation and anger. Next, we are going to talk about Amar Mitra's story Wild Goose Country, which is set on the hilly border of West Dinajpur in 1996, and it's talking about the reality of borders as reflected by the barbed wire fence, which defines the demarcated area of India and Bangladesh. So, the author has utilized this symbol of the lone goose, which is separated from its flock, and this goose, the lone goose flying apart from its flock, cannot control the vertigo of fate. And so, the story in a way is a commentary on the futility of national borders, and what this what political divisions have done to the quality of human lives, the quality of human existence. So, in their study of borderlands, Michael Bod and Willem van Schendel use the term border to define the political differences which precipitated the partition and which enabled separate state building, and emphasized how all across the world boundaries became key elements in the new increasingly global system of states. So, when we talk of barbed wire, we are referring to an impassable barrier, a sharp line from the perspective of the national centers of authority. So, this border area, this barbed fence is also coupled with surveillance. There are security forces that constantly patrol the area and make sure that the sanctity of the border is indeed maintained in practice. So, yet on the other hand, the ground reality as it stands tells the reader that borderlands are vast scenarios of exchanges between individuals. So, so the borderland similar to Taswees, the Wagah Canal tells reflects the unsuspected unity of split populations at a marketplace. So, in the pedestrian reality of their lives, there was no sign of the border. There was just a sea of people who has swallowed up all the marks with demarcated, which demarcated one country from another. So, people are shown as coming over to the other side, trading across the barbed wire, and they are buying common goods. So, something that is something as common as Zandubam, which is not available on one side of the border, is being traded to the other side. Something that that is of mundane use, that supports smooth sustenance. So, the story actually lets the reader to decide whether one could call this as smuggling, even trading some fish for some Zandubam, if that could be called as illegal or something that enables, that supports smooth human living. So, the intricate network borderland transactions may have sparked political squabbles, resulting in the decision to create barbed wire barrier, and in this way identify the infiltrators, keep the infiltrators at bay. So, we see that the state functions at one level, and yet the ordinary people have their own ways of making life easier, of making transactions across border. And what is significant and interesting is that when the trade goes on across the border in this story, the border security force is standing inert and not really resisting the entire process, and it's not so it's an open secret that everyone knows, and because it supports human lives, it's a means of earning for so many poor people. The border security person does not really resist or threaten these people. He is an onlooker to the entire process, and here we see him through, I mean, here his human dimension is revealed more than his role as a state agent, as a coercive state agent. So, as a human who understands fellow humans' needs, he passively supports the process. So, in the story, Masroor's visions of birds serve as a leitmotif in the novel, symbolizing his longing for the lost homeland. So, at one point, Masroor and Subir, the two characters, are lying on the terrace, and they say, and it goes as on tremulous wings these flew across from the east towards the northwest. So, the two characters have their own ways of looking at the goose. So, Subir believes looking at the geese. So, as the flock flies, Subir believes that they are warplanes, whereas Masroor believes that they are geese. So, there is a kind of optical delusion, a kind of like there is a point where vision is not unified, or one's you know, perspectives are not unified. Depending on what one believes, one sees, or one sees something based on what one believes. So, there is a gap in the perspectives of between the perspective of Subir and Masroor. So, one might believe, one might look at a geopolitical space in terms of continuity, whereas the other sees it in terms of an irreconcilable gap. So, Masroor himself could be seen as the lone goose that had apparently wandered away from the group, and so that lone goose is wobbling across the sky. And then there is a mention of Amal Bhattacharya, who is a minority in Bangladesh, who stayed back, and so Masroor used to know his family and cousin, and there is the mention of a very beautiful aunt whose whereabouts throughout the story are constantly marked by an absence. And everyone talks about the aunt, and the discussion keeps coming back, but no one knows her whereabouts. She is constantly absent. Who is this aunt? The absent aunt could be seen as a symbol of the unified Bengal or the unified motherland. It could be the unified India, which is imagined as very beautiful, who was a mother-like figure for everyone, but no one knows where that mother has gone, or the mother-like figure has disappeared. So, everyone is in search of this old woman. So, Masroor grasps the barbed wire that wounds his skin, and it leaves red spots as a proof of his failed attempt to infiltrate the past and transcend a partition's reality. So, it is also the fact that a partition has decided one's destiny. It is a break in one's destiny and rebuilding of one's destiny, which cannot be transgressed, which cannot be overcome. And so, the wounds of partition are depicted through the barbed wires ripping through Masroor's flesh. So, he is hypertrophied and left trailing in disenchantment like the flock of wild geese that flies away in oblivion. So, and it leaves one straggling goose behind, right. So, reconstructing from both the stories, what we get is that reconstructing the long forgotten house or home, the home that one has left behind and journeyed to a point of no return, getting back that home is impossible. So, the folks, the people, the sufferers of partition, which are the common people, are trapped and they are trapped and ruled, kind of they are trapped, and their destiny is shaped by some higher authority, and their identities are etched on them from above. And so an arbitrary boundary actually determines where they belong. With this, I am going to stop today's lecture, and let us meet again for another round of discussions in the next class. Thank you.